Welcome to another episode of the Liberator podcast. I'm here with James ProWoman and Sam Riley, and today we're going to be talking about the 5 components of an abolition bill. Like, what are the significant, necessary, important aspects of a true bill of total and immediate abolition. But before we get into that, we've started something new on the podcast, something new here at Free the States, and that is a monthly drawing. And the winner of the first drawing, and well, maybe I explain what that is. All of our monthly supporters, the people who make sure that these guys are fed.
Or who has given a one-time donation of more than $500.
Yeah, which we don't use any of that money to feed you. All that money goes just to buying materials and supporting the work of Free the States. So basically, as a way to thank the people who allow us to do this work, and since I am a illustrator, and I wouldn't be able to be doing illustrations if I had some other job, we wanted to be able to give back to our supporters. So we've taken all of the supporters' names and written them on fancy little pieces of paper, put them in this bowl, which is a small bowl now, but we're hoping it grows bigger. And we are going to be drawing a name and giving a piece of original artwork to them because it's better than it sitting around here. And so we did our drawing yesterday for the first piece of art, and the winner was William Carlin. So in case he didn't see that special announcement on the Free the States Facebook page, we're putting it in this episode. Now, when's the next episode? September
24th.
So by September 24th, we will do another drawing on September 24th, the episode that airs on the 24th, and it will be for this piece of art, which is something that's not been put up or out anywhere. It's going to be used in a drop card that we are producing, hopefully this month or sometime soon. So we will be drawing a name, and the winner will get that piece of artwork, and I guess we'll display it on the set back there for the next 3 or 4 episodes. I guess 3 episodes. Math is not my strong suit. So congratulations.
Just tempt you guys. It's sitting there tempting you.
So every time you see that, you think, man, I could win that.
Yeah.
If I were only supporting Free the States. But you shouldn't be supporting Free the States simply because you want the art. You should be supporting us because it's the right thing to do. No, because it's good for the abolitionist cause. But if you just want the art, start becoming a monthly supporter. We'll get your name in there, and hopefully you win. But yeah, so congratulations to William Carlin, which actually when I pulled this name out, I didn't even know. I was like, William Carlin, I guess I'm friends with him on Facebook. Sounds like a really nice guy. But William Carlin actually, what was it? He ran for office?
Mm-hmm. Yep, he ran against Ben Smaltz for state house in Indiana in 2018.
Yeah. So he deserves to win. He won randomly in the providence of God, but he's an active abolitionist in Indiana who ran against Schmaltz, who is like one of the big. He's 100% pro-life approved pro-lifer who kills bills of abolition.
Yep, he's the Jeff Leach and Greg McCourtney of Indiana.
Yeah. He's the Greg McCourtney. Wow. You're the Jeff Leach of Indiana. So I'm really happy that he has that, and hopefully he'll be blessed by it, or, give it to someone who will be. So anyway, congratulations that sign up. So back to this episode. We're going to do the 5 components that are crucial to understanding an abolition bill as contrasted with a pro-life bill. So this, of course, we have a document on our website, but the 5 components, go ahead, maybe just take us through those, James. James,
Yeah.
What are the 5 components?
So the 5 components, as Russell said, we have a document, a page on our website explaining all of these, but we're going to do this episode and go through each one of them in even more detail than the website has. So the first one is abolish abortion from conception. Right, from conception is the key there. The second component is no exceptions. The third component is equal protection or criminalization. The fourth component is ignore Roe. And the fifth component is repeals or supersedes all contrary statutes, including pro-life regulations.
Yeah.
So
this is you might have heard, if you've been following the abolitionist kind of movement over time, you might have heard there's like 5 tenets of abolitionism, and those are sort of like philosophical principles undergirding the ideology of abolitionism. These are 5 particular components that we look for, that abolitionists who believe in those tenets look for in bills. So the whole point of the list that you just put out there are, these are the things that we look for specifically in deciding whether or not this is a good or a bad bill. So we don't want to really delay it. We want to go through them each and speak about them to some degree each. So let's just go ahead and start. That first one, abolish abortion from conception. Like the bill, the way it's written, it has to be talking about abolishing abortion, criminalizing abortion from the moment of conception, from the moment of fertilization, from the moment that there is a newly conceived human being in the womb.
Right. And so this gets to kind of the heart of the incrementalism versus immediatism debate about supporting bills which treat all human life equally, right? Which don't say these human beings can be killed and these human beings can't. We're writing a law consistent with what we believe, with what God's word clearly teaches, with what the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution demand of us.
Yeah.
We're writing a law consistent with those that abolishes abortion from conception. And there's 2 big reasons why this is really important. And the first one is about the intrinsic injustice of a bill that doesn't abolish abortion from conception. Because if you're saying that you're getting rid of abortion after pain capability, right? So 20 weeks or thereabouts, you're saying implicitly abortion, the murder of a human being, shall be allowed up until 20 weeks. Right?
Yeah.
That's they'll try to say, no, all we're saying is it's illegal after 20 weeks, but it's inescapably, implicitly, it's implied in that bill, abortion's allowed up to 20 weeks. And so you've got something that's intrinsically unjust, and we oppose it for that reason. And then there's kind of this thing that goes along with it. When you have something that's intrinsically unjust like that, the effect of that is you teach the culture injustice. And so you get situations where you're outside an abortion clinic,
right.
And I've told this story on the podcast before, but it bears repeating because it's really important.
Yeah. And a lot of people have probably experienced something like this.
Right. You go to the abortion clinic and you heard someone tell you, well, it's, don't worry about it. I'm pro-life, but this baby isn't going to feel any pain. So don't worry about the abortion, right?
Yeah.
My baby's not feeling pain. And where does that type of idea come from? It comes from the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, which establishes pain as the marker for which lives are valuable and which aren't. And so you're teaching that injustice to the culture.
So it's a bill that's not abolishing abortion in and of itself. It's a bill that's abolishing abortion after a certain period, which is a way of keeping abortion up to that period legal. So really, you'll have a bill that's kind of covered in the media, certainly by the pro-life media, and the radical pro-choicers are going to, for the sake of their fundraising, they'll be like, "Oh, we really oppose this bill that's banning abortion in Texas or Alabama or wherever," and they'll call it an abortion ban, but really it's sort of you're not allowed to do this kind of abortion at this stage. So the really significant thing, and to compare like an abolition bill and a pain capability bill or a heartbeat bill, is that an abolition bill doesn't look at abolishing abortion after a certain period. It's if you have a human being there, it's abortion in itself. You cannot abort a human being because they're a human being. A lot of the pro-life bills that may be styled as abortion bans they're not you can't abort a human being. You cannot end the life of a human being who feels pain, or a human being who this or that or whatever. So very important that that's in there. And if it's not in there, of course, it's not an abolition bill. And
it's a
if
pro-choice bill is what it is, because it's you end up getting plagued with the same kind of arbitrariness of saying, oh, when this baby moves 8 inches down the birth canal, they're a full-fledged human and a person, and we shouldn't kill them. And then the bills that say, oh, they feel pain, let's make sure they're not killed. That's a pro-choice bill. It's just as arbitrary. They're just putting it at a different point where you can choose to murder your child.
Yep.
Like there's someone that would say you can kill your baby once they're born. I've talked to students that say that all the time. They say, oh yeah, once they're born, I don't think they're a person until like maybe 5 years old or something like that. I've heard them say that.
Because they're being more consistent, actually, the pro-choicer who says that.
Yeah. Well, the only consistency with arbitrariness is just more arbitrariness, I think.
Yeah, so. You're being even more arbitrary, so good on you. But yeah, no, I think the point is that there will be a pro-lifer who is arguing with a pro-abortion person and says, well, what, does it magically become a baby when it comes out of the fallopian tube? To point out how arbitrary the pro-choicer's being. Like, look, you're going from a human inside the womb to a human outside the womb. Why are you protecting the human outside of the womb when it's just a geographical change of a few inches? Well, they're willing to point out the arbitrariness and the inconsistency of the pro-choicer, but an abolitionist is doing that to them, saying, well, wait, so if it's a 20-week ban, well, are you saying that at 19 days or 19 weeks and 5 days or something like that, it's not a human? And so they're doing the same sort of arbitrary thing as it is. And of course, we point that out. And, we would say it's not only the problem with this bill is that it's failing to be an abolition bill. The problem with this bill is it's an iniquitous decree, that it is showing, partiality towards the babies who can feel pain. So that's number one. Abolish abortion from conception, abolish abortion in and of itself, not abortion at some stage or some period. Number two, abolitionist bill, to be an abolitionist bill, that it has to have zero exceptions for abortion. So zero, like, okay, we're abolishing abortion except for in this case. So zero exception. So what are the general exceptions that we see in pro-life bills?
Right. So. I think the most frequent one we see is the rape exception. That one comes up probably the most. And that's probably the one that people are always talking about, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice or whatever. It's those are the ones that they think are just the easiest sell to the culture, because our culture doesn't value fatherless children all that much. And so in
the guise of wanting to be compassionate to women who were unjustly, one, that violence was done against them, a great evil thing was done against them. And then there's this child that was conceived in the process. And I think that for some people, it's like a desire to sort of empathize with her.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't help her to kill the baby. It doesn't unrape her. But I think the pro-lifer is wanting to put an exception in their bill, not just because they're sympathizing, but they're thinking, this is the only way I'm going to get this passed.
Yeah.
So in some cases, I mean, there are pro-lifers who include a rape exception just to get the thing passed. And there are also pro-lifers who, as a principle, think it should be legal in the case of rape. That's not an uncommon
That's
thing.
true. I mean, I think a lot of normal pro-life people, like, I'll see comments, and a lot of times these comments will start out with, I am 100% pro-life, but I don't think that you should take away an abortion for someone who's been raped.
Yeah.
Because and it's because they're not really thinking you have a human being there, you can't murder humans.
Yeah.
They're thinking, well,
it's kind of weird. It's like, because I saw this on a pro-life website a while back, and I was really annoyed about it, and I was like, we need to cause a big stink about this. I was talking to my boss about it, like, because this is ridiculous that it's on there. And it's kind of the same type of, like, we don't want to be stepping on toes and stuff like that. But Pro-Life San Francisco, if you want to check it out, they have on their website our leadership is divided on the question of whether or not we should be able to murder a fatherless child.
Did they say it that way?
Exactly that way. Yeah.
We're undecided about whether it's okay to murder fatherless children. They usually euphemize it completely, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, they basically. I think they even say that it's because of Thompson's argument, Judith Jarvis Thompson's argument. The violinist.
Some of us buy into the violinist argument or something like that.
Yeah, with rape. Only.
Yeah,
and
because she didn't choose. She woke up and she was pregnant.
Yeah, she didn't choose to be in that situation,
which is a horrible situation. But again, the abolitionist perspective is you have an image bearer there. They did not do anything to deserve the death penalty. Mm-hmm. You cannot punish them. So better to help a mother in that situation. Help her, surround her with love. Mm-hmm. Do what you can to make sure that the child is adopted if she's not going to raise the child. But you never punish a child for the crimes of the father, and you never get rid of a person simply because of how inconveniencing or even how painful they're going to cause your life. You can't.
Well, it's really, I think it's kind of ironic that the culture right now is rejecting the death sentence ever for convicted rapists and murderers and things like that, but it's the child that gets the axe in this case. So it's it's such a hypocritical, just disgusting thing. Let's kill this child, but no, let's not, condemn to death anyone who would rape a woman and create a fatherless child. Which is really disgusting.
Yeah, our culture is such a social justice addicted culture, but really what it is that we hate justice. So whenever you have a serial murderer rapist on death row, the people who are like, it's wrong to kill him, are the people who are like, it's okay to kill the baby conceived in rape. Mm-hmm. The completely innocent child, you can kill them, but the completely guilty adult, you can't kill them. So it's flipped around, and it's because they hate justice, which justice would demand the death of the criminal, of the murderer, and justice would demand the protection of the child. Mm-hmm. But this weird, just insane empathy, like you have empathy
false
for
empathy.
The false empathy. Yeah.
I think that's what
insane.
A lot of it,
It's just like, you care so much for the mother that you think that you want to help her by violently destroying the baby that was conceived in the act. Yeah. You care so much for the criminal, you think it's going to help them and society to preserve them and pay for them for the rest of their life in jail. Right. When it doesn't really help the mother, it doesn't really help society, but we're getting off on all that kind of stuff. But that is generally, they want to, for whatever reason, they want to include a rape, incest exception. An abolitionist bill that's trying to abolish abortion doesn't include those exceptions. And before we move on to the health of the life of the mother, I do want to say that, like, if you include a rape exception, and why an abolitionist bill couldn't do that because we're trying to abolish abortion, but if you were to say abolish all abortions except for in the case of rape, how would that even be legislated? Like, how someone wants to get an abortion, you just have to say, I was raped. Mm-hmm. And then the doctor, and our culture is going to be like, well, but were you? I mean, he's going to be Me Too'd, immediately. I mean, you can't, that person goes and says, I have to abort this baby because I'm raped. I mean, you would have people going to get abortions, and the father of the child, being willing to say, like, well, I don't want to raise this baby. Just say the baby was conceived in rape. And there'd be no way of legislating it. Mm-hmm. Now, someone says, well, we could require that they do a criminal thing or something like that, and that you have to prove that it was a rape or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard to legislate that what's really going on is to keep abortion legal for rape victims, you're going to have to basically keep abortion legal. Mm-hmm. And that exception basically keeps it all legal because you can't do anything. Yeah. And regardless, most babies are not being murdered in the womb because of rape. Yeah. It's just not.
And so with the rape exception, you've got the same issues as with, say, like an exception for babies prior to 20 weeks. You've got intrinsic injustice in the bill saying you can murder human beings in this instance.
Right.
And then you've also got the secondary educational effect that has, right? And Sam, you were at a school in California, and you're doing anti-abortion outreach, and a girl comes up and says,
Yep.
what does your group say about abortion in the case of rape? And you explain to her why, it's still the killing of an innocent human being. You explain all that, and she starts crying, and she says, like, what was it? You remember?
Yeah, she said that, thank you for saying it, because I said I don't believe that it's ever okay to punish a child for the sins of the father. And she said, well, thank you for saying that. She's crying. She says, thank you for saying that because I was conceived in rape. Right. She said that she had felt devalued by so many of her friends because they were saying that she was an example of somebody that it's okay to kill because her father was horrible.
Yeah.
I think James has probably actually told that story more than I have.
Yeah, no. Well, but think about how many, I mean, it's awful, but it's this sinful culture that we live in, but everybody knows somebody who was conceived in rape. Everybody knows tons of people who were not conceived in love by choice, there's just, and so I think that people who were conceived in rape, whether they were raised by their mothers or adopted, in a culture where you constantly have, oh, well, we're gonna fight abortion because we're Christians, except for we're gonna leave it legal for babies conceived in rape. It's like, what the heck are you telling me? Like I should, and I think that this is kind of a weird problem for pro-life legislators and pro-life leaders whenever they're wanting to stump for a bill that's got a rape exception in it, but at the same time get rape conceived children speaking on their stages.
It's weird too, because how do you even advertise that to a group of people that you're trying to get this passed? Like, how does these pro-life legislators go out and say, this bill is great, we're going to allow you to murder rape conceived babies? Like, knowing what they know about their demographics too, it's like, it's so weird that they would even throw it in there in the first place.
Well, there is something that was it the Abby Johnson? She's talking in Texas, and there's a bill in Texas too. I think it was a 20-week ban, right? And it had a rape exception. Yeah. And she says, "Now I know this has some exceptions, but don't get in a tizzy." Yeah. It has a rape exception, but don't get in a tizzy. Yeah. And so that's kind of how they have to treat those situations.
Yeah, well, because they want to base it. And I think that when they say that, a lot of the pro-lifers who are themselves, they don't want people murdering children for rape. There's this weird thing that happens in their sort of mind that's always thinking about numbers. Like, how do we save the most? How do we do the most good? How much evil are we going to allow? And so they're willing to support this bill and not get into a tizzy because it does some good. Yeah. And then the thing is what happens is they end up calling that bill good. And saying that we shouldn't get mad about this evil. It's kind of like saying, here, I baked this pie for you. It's a chocolate pie. Now, 2% of it is dog crap, but don't get into a tizzy about it. Eat the pie.
Don't call the health inspector.
It's just kind of like this is this really bad thing that we all agree is a really bad thing, but don't freak out about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the clearest demonstrations of that Hyrick quote that you like so much, James. It says that these iniquitous decrees, they actually abate the anger of the people. Yeah. And this is a pro-life leader saying you shouldn't be so angry about this injustice that we're putting into law. Yeah. Like advocating for you to be less angry about the fact that we're murdering. Yeah. You're committing a genocide against an entire generation of people. Yeah. And we should just not get so mad about that one exception. Devaluing people, telling the culture that it's okay to devalue people based on where they're from. I mean, come on, it just smacks against everything. But yeah, it's the educational effect of it alone. And in the Hyrick quote about like kind of debases our moral outrage that should be. If there was like a bill, like if in the state of Texas, for instance, you weren't allowed to have abortions except for in the case of rape. Yeah. And that was like, say, 5,000 human beings a year. Like, and only 5,000 babies were being aborted in Texas. And it was all because they were conceived in rape. Christians should be having a conniption about that. Like, we literally should be freaking out about the literal least of these, the fatherless child being led away to death because of something they didn't do. Yeah. Like, that is something that Christians should be fighting for. Not Christians should be standing up and saying, well, don't freak out, everybody. Yeah. And of course, this is, that's a pro-life thing.
not an abolitionist thing.
But it does show how much like identity politics have just infected our like the pro-life movement's approach, because they do it in both ways. They go, let's get rid of Down syndrome abortions because so many Down syndrome babies are being aborted, and let's get rid of, and they'll go after these people groups, like if we could find the gay gene, would we save all the gay kids type stuff. And that's like that infects so much of their reasoning, because it's all focused on groups and like just identity groups and stuff like that. But you're not focusing on the fact that any murder of a preborn child should not be tolerated. That's wicked. It's evil. Don't allow it. Which
kind of goes with this first component and the second component. If you just said, anytime there's a human being there, you cannot murder them. Full stop. No exception. The moment you have a human, you cannot murder them. Just simple. It's consistent. And if you don't do that for pragmatic reasons or for false empathy reasons, if you don't do it, your bill is going to fail. So that's why. So those are number one. Number two, I guess we should talk. One of the exceptions that is often brought up is actually the life, health of the mother, and pro-lifers not only write that exception into all their bills because they think they have to get them passed, or because they know somebody who's been in a serious situation, but they actually will use that as an argument against our bills. So an abolitionist bill does not include an exception to, murder a child for the health of the mother or for the life of the mother.
Right. And so this is a very nuanced point, but a really important one. And so first off, I guess off the top, we should deal with health of the mother. And it's important to understand what that is. So the idea that abortion is legal for the health of the mother comes actually not from Roe v. Wade, but comes from Doe v. Bolton, which is kind of the companion case of Roe v. Wade, also decided in 1973. And it basically established that health of the mother includes psychological health, includes familial health, includes basically anything. Like you can just say, I'm very stressed. Boom.
Having this baby would lead me to such despair that I'd kill myself.
Right. Or it would cause, my boyfriend to leave me, or it would, cause any sort of familial trouble.
Change my body through weight gain and
anything.
Anything counts as health of the mother. So that one has to be immediately rejected as just this thing that allows abortion for pretty much any
when
reason.
you see in a bill health of the mother, you can drive a bus through it. It's got all the same abortions. So run.
Yeah. And so life of the mother, the reason we don't include a life of the mother exception is because when you include a blanket exception for something like that, what you get is kind of what you touched on earlier. People can, it's a loophole that can be exploited very easily. A doctor can say, well, here's some condition that could potentially cause some harm, and so for that we're going to do it. And you see that with other things, like for marijuana, you have to have a medical condition in Oklahoma to get a marijuana card. But every doctor is just like, oh, okay, you said your hand hurts a little bit.
What's your medical condition?
Right.
I'm human. Oh, here's some dope.
Right.
Yeah. It's the condition can be just open to anything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So like the health of the mother easily, but even the life of the mother one.
It can be abused as a loophole.
It can be abused, but I think we should talk about now there is obviously, since the fall of man and just what it's happened to us biologically, sin entering the world, and just it's a bad, evil things happen naturally. And so definitely it is true that babies sometimes are forming in the womb in places that are dangerous, both for the child, oftentimes mainly for the child because of where they're developing in relation to where they're at in the fallopian tube, or if they're on the outside of the tube, or if they're too high up or something like that, that they can possibly develop to a certain size, a rupture, and it's harmful to the mother. That is something that happens. It's not like we're saying there aren't situations where a mother's life could be in danger.
Right.
But why would we not include explicitly in the bill, something about that?
Right. And so Senate Bill 13, which is the abolition bill we had here in Oklahoma, it had a clause that was not exactly identical, but nearly identical to the language from the triage section of the healthcare Oklahoma codes.
Yeah.
And they put it in SB 13. And basically what it says is that a doctor is not liable for any sort of criminal act if he or she has done everything at his disposal to save the life of the child and the mother, and the child passes away. Like a doctor who does what he can to save the child's life in an emergency situation and, is not able to, is not going to go away for murder.
Yeah.
Now, the intentional use of it to just murder right off the bat and not even make an attempt to treat both human beings as human beings,
that's what would be prohibited.
Right, that's prohibited.
Yeah.
But if you make a good faith attempt to save both lives and the child doesn't survive, you're not going away for murder. And so that clause is in Senate Bill 13. And so it's not a blanket exception that can be abused, but it is something that recognizes there are situations where the doctor is not going to be able to save both human beings.
It's not an exception for abortion.
Right.
It's an acknowledgement of the reality of these situations. And I think that it's disingenuous when people bring it up, because clearly there's something completely different about someone who's like, oh, I've got a baby, I'm going to go kill it, and somebody who's losing a child because of a miscarriage. Right. Now, if you go in and you're getting your 18-week ultrasound, your second ultrasound to check out the baby, and the doctor says, wow, this baby is very likely not going to make it, and we may have to do a D&E and remove this child because you're in danger. In a state where abortion was abolished, the doctor would say, you're in danger, this is a serious situation, you would go into bed rest, and they would do everything in their power to monitor the situation to protect the child from death, the mother from death, and to be there ready for anything that happened. Doctors would be required to be doctors, to keep the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm. Now, in our world right now, I fear, and I know, because you run into people who have this story and it's just heartbreaking. And they say, well, what about abortion in the case of an ectopic pregnancy? And in our culture right now, where abortion is completely legal on demand, I think a doctor sometimes looks at it. It may or may not be ectopic. It may be ectopic and okay, because babies are born from ectopic pregnancies. Sometimes you watch and wait and everything's fine. But I think that when abortion is so easy and accessible and it's the go-to answer, instead of watching, waiting, praying, being at the ready to help the child, being at the ready to help the mother, it's go abort this baby and then let's try again. That is the way that a law with the life of the mother exception and that education has that effect.
It enables that.
It enables it and encourages it. And really, they've done some scientific studies. You can treat this situation.
Yeah.
Like, there are medical procedures that could be developed and worked on to be able to help children in ectopic situations.
Right. And those aren't always successful. Actually, they've very rarely been successful, though they have been successful. It's rare. But right now, they're not even trying to develop those
Why
procedures.
would you research that procedure and develop the procedure when you can just kill that baby,
just have an easy solution,
and then try for another child?
And so abolishing abortion will actually have the effect of
improving
the care for ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah. So if you're concerned about the life of the mother situation, truly concerned, then you'd want to pass a bill abolishing abortion as murder that had the triage in there, but at the same time was going to be serious about it and encourage the medical establishment to figure out what to do. So again, when we're looking at these bills, it's not just like what their effect on the law, it's their effect on the wider culture. And in this case, that'd be the effect on the medical community. And I don't want to, and I know people may be watching this or listening to this, and I don't want to be insensitive, but we do live in a culture where people have killed their babies, like their ectopic, just unnecessarily, just willy-nilly killed them and think that they're doing the right thing when they may not have been.
Right. Likely because the doctors resort to that right away without making any attempt.
Yeah.
Well, I've talked to so many people that said, I had a completely terminal diagnosis when I was in the womb, and my mom talked to 6 doctors, and they all said, you're going to have to abort. Still here. There's this guy at Cleveland State University. He was completely blind, but he was studying French. He was getting his degree. He was doing fine other than the blindness, but they said that he was going to die and he wasn't going to make it. And he's still here.
Yeah.
That's one of many, many cases.
Because I think, and whenever we went in to do my son's ultrasound, and he was going to have spina bifida and all that, and the person, kind of lets us know, okay, you're at 18 weeks. If you were going to do something, we're like, shut your mouth. It's kind of like, you got to get it done before 20 weeks because the pro-lifers said you got to abort your baby before 20 weeks. Well, that sort of situation isn't like a life of the mother, but it's like your child could be messed up. So we would also not make an exception to abort babies with severe fetal abnormalities.
Yeah.
Which I think is a lot, like when you look at the late abortions, a lot of them are whenever at some point in time you've detected something very wrong. And like when your baby's born, they're going to immediately need surgery. They're going to immediately need this, and their quality of life is not going to be great. And then parents abort them. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, how do we deal with people who need help? Murder them.
Yeah.
So again, in our culture, when you make these exceptions, you devalue those human beings who you should be loving, showing compassionate care for, and you just kill them. So an abolition bill, of course, says, no, we want to protect all humans from the moment of conception without exception, regardless of all the situations and everything about how they were conceived. So that would be the second one, no exceptions. Third, an abolitionist bill, and this is sort of goes along with those, but what we look for specifically is equal protection under the law. And the kind of shorthand for this is like the laws against murder will be equally applied to all people, to all human beings.
Right. And so there are three reasons why this third component is very important. And I've written about this both on our website, and also I wrote an article, I co-wrote it with a friend of mine, Georgie Borman, for The Federalist. Mm-hmm. And there's three reasons why this one's really, really important. So the first one is that if you don't provide equal protection, if you don't treat the murder of a preborn child the same as the murder of a born child, if you include a blanket immunity for the mother, which is what all pro-life bills do. Yep. They say the mother is immune from prosecution. If you do that, the first problem is that you've legalized self-induced abortion, which is really on the rise because abortion pill technology is being developed. And so if you say a bill is good in every other respect, right? If it's every other component, does everything we want it to do,
but says there will be no justice or punishment for the mother.
Right. What you now have is legal self-induced pill abortions.
Yeah.
Which, there's websites
or even non-pill abortions.
Or even non-pill abortions, which isn't as popular.
Someone it's not as popular because it's dangerous and people are selfish. But people always bring up coat hangers and they're like, well, did you want this to happen? And I always want to be like, it's wrong to murder a baby with a coat hanger too.
Yeah.
And it's also stupid. But today you can just get on the internet and order abortion
and have it shipped right to your door.
Yeah. And then you take it. So this is someone who's malice, forethought, ordering a pill to get rid of their child. And then you've got pro-life legislation that protects them completely.
Yeah.
There will not be any punishment.
Coat hanger thing is so frustrating to me. It's like, unless you let me do this psychotic thing to my child, I'm going to do the psychotic thing to myself and my child.
Yeah. If you don't allow me to pay someone to kill my baby with surgical instruments, I'm going to use this. And it's like, you realize you're a bunch of like angry feminists waving around coat hangers saying, if you don't allow us to kill our babies, we're going to kill our babies. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what we deal with. Right. So that was the first thing. If you write into your laws protection for the mother, the laws against murder are not going to be equally applied to mothers. Mothers have an exemption. Right. You're not allowed to murder human beings unless you're that human being's mother and that human being is in the womb.
Right.
That's awful.
Right. So the second reason is that you've now provided no incentive for that mother not to have an abortion, which is one of the things of laws. It should lead people away from bad things like murder. It should teach people that that's wrong. Yeah. And
the law's a tutor in that event.
Right. And so Laura Klassen, if you're not following Laura Klassen on Facebook and Twitter, you should be. She's awesome. She posted on Facebook a while back asking post-abortive mothers, would you have done this if abortion was a criminal act and you would have been looking at criminal charges for murdering your child? And every single person who responded, who was post-abortive, said, no, I would not have.
Yeah, and she's got fans that are pro-life, pro-lifers and abolition. I mean, she's got all sorts of people listening to her. So it's not. It wasn't like all bunch of abolitionists who were like got their mind straight on this. They were like answering. It was like actual pro-lifers who are that are post-abortive. They were like, you know what? I wouldn't have.
I would not have risked a first-degree murder charge to do this.
Yeah, because and think about it. The reason that people are killing their children is because they're selfishness. Like it's the sin of selfishness. And so the reason that they would also not kill their children because they're selfish. Like, I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to get in trouble. And so the law is supposed to function in that way to prohibit the evildoer from doing things.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it wasn't just the Laura Klassen thing, which you have just a ton of evidence, but pretty much any post-abortive woman that I've ever talked to.
Yeah.
Because we've had a number of post-abortive mothers in the state of Oklahoma who have spoken at the rally for Senate Bill 13, made videos and basically said, I am post-abortive. I support the total criminalization of abortion.
Yep.
And furthermore, I probably would not have aborted my child if it would have meant homicide.
Right.
And then you talk to them and they say, like, I never even really, like, they'll say, I knew in my heart that I was doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. But all the lawmakers were telling me it wasn't homicide.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
at the hearing for the Texas Abolition Bill last year, I think that it was like 312 people or something like that who testified in favor of the Abolition Bill. And it was like 9 or 10 of them were post-abortive mothers. And then there's also Jason Storms.
post-abortive father.
Right, a good friend of ours, post-abortive father, testifying in favor of that bill. And one of the things that Jason talked about was me and my ex-girlfriend would never have done this.
Yeah.
There's no chance. We would have, if we were looking at first-degree murder, our child would be alive. And he said, my child would be 22 years old, and they'd be here testifying alongside me.
Yeah.
Which is it's really interesting with the double victim narrative where they just treat women as just these stupid people who don't know that they have a baby.
Yeah.
That's their argument for why we couldn't have the criminalization right now. But then the criminalization would get rid of that component.
It'd be the main thing telling them.
This is murder. And so they would know.
Yeah.
It's like, if
you
they
can't
don't know
punish
now,
them for murdering their children. They don't think they're murdering their children. So how dare you tell them that they're murdering their children?
Yeah. So, that would inform them immediately. But then also on top of that, it's like, it's this drive to be compassionate towards women and this like sort of feminist type of push for
to appear as compassionate to the culture.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's both. You may have the actual, it's just like the earlier thing we were talking about. It's like, but we want to appear as compassionate.
Well, it's like, it's all this argument against these feminists that are saying, oh, you're not pro-women, you hate women, and blah, 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 blah. And they'll use this as their push against them, but then they end up making this super sexist argument where you have no moral culpability for women that are murdering their child. Like, you're not even treating them as a moral agent, and you're not treating them as intelligent.
Yeah.
And so, like, what does that say about your view about women? You're saying it's murder.
Yeah.
But then you're saying women can't know that it's murder, even though they know that it's murder.
Women can't know it's murder, even if you tell them it's murder.
Yeah,
like it's super demeaning. Mm-hmm. Like from start to finish, these pro-life bills are generally demeaning to women. Even if you're not talking about the we're not going to hold you culpable. This whole idea that like women don't know what they're doing, like they don't know what a baby is, or where babies come from.
Yeah.
Or, anything about embryological development. Mm-hmm. And then you go over to the pro-choicer pages, the pro-abort pages, and all that kind of stuff. Or you look at their signs, they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. But then they also treat the dads in the situation like they are moral agents and they are intelligent enough to know that the baby is being murdered. Just like, these people are abusive. Yeah, the pro-lifers do. Yeah. These fathers are abusive. They're forcing these women into it and they're pressuring them.
Yeah.
And their family's pressuring them. So it's like the shift of all this moral culpability on everyone.
Because the man knows what he's doing, and he's taking her to do the abortion to get rid of the child so he doesn't have to raise it.
Yeah.
Because he's not a nincompoop when it comes to where humans come from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy because they're like pro-life, pro-woman, pro-science. Mm. Well, actually, you're demeaning towards women, you're scientifically ignorant, and you're not really pro-life because you have all these exceptions for when it's okay to kill a human being.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Hey, harshest truth, sorry. But it's just absolute self-refuting rubbish. Okay, so that's the automatic immunity doesn't provide incentive.
One final point on that: if the father is involved in the decision to murder the baby, then he should be he should face a murder charge as well.
Yeah.
So
So the equal protection here isn't just saying the mother and only the mother.
Right.
It's everyone and anyone involved in a murder, because there's co-conspirators.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was, we were talking a second ago about Laura Klassen's post. There was one person who did dissent.
Yes, we're going to come back to that. The one person who said, I still would have had the abortion even if it had been first-degree murder. The one person who said that was Abby Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Abby Johnson was like, I still would have done it. And the reason I think that she claimed that she still would have done it was because she's trying to defend this idea that women don't know what they're doing, and that they're still going to do it anyways, even if you make it first degree murder. And she's trying to justify all these pro-life messaging strategies.
She's pro-life industry, pro-life establishment.
Yeah.
So she's got to lie about everything, in order to like protect the things that they're going to do. She's going to be on a stage with people that are backing, killing babies for all these reasons.
Yeah.
She's got to like, on this informal survey, said, no, I would have still done it if it were homicide.
Right.
When everybody else who doesn't have a stake in it
is
like, no, I wouldn't have done it.
Dozens and dozens of post-abortive, mostly mothers, I think a few fathers, all were unanimous. No, I would not have faced
except for the literal most famous pro-lifer in the world.
Well, and then the mind-boggling thing to me was that Laura makes a post saying, okay, there was only one person who dissented, and it was Abby Johnson. And then all of her supporters got mad at Laura for revealing that Abby Johnson was the only person who would have aborted her child. It's like, why wouldn't you reveal that? If everyone is saying criminalization would have stopped me from killing my child, and Abby Johnson is the only one who's saying otherwise, why wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and in the end, what is Abby Johnson wanting to do? Criminalize abortion? No. Mm-hmm. Because if you can't, this is crazy. You're not going to hear me agree with President Trump very often.
Yeah.
But I will agree with campaigning President Trump back before he was president when he said, well, if there's, if it's going to be, if we're going to go against abortion, it's got to be some kind of punishment.
Yeah.
Because it just logically makes sense. You can't criminalize something. What kind of sense does it make? You're not allowed to do this, but if you do it, we're going to protect you.
You can't steal that car. It's a criminal act, but you're not going to be punished for it.
In fact, you'll get to keep the car. It's just like, you're not allowed to murder your baby, but if you do murder your baby, you just won't have a baby, and that'll be. But the pro-lifers would be like, and that's punishment enough. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I'm sure that the person who murders another born person has trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Should we protect them? Because of the damage it does to them to be a murderer.
Right.
Yeah.
So and on that vein, trotting out the toddler against pro-lifers is very helpful, right? And then that's something that pro-lifers use against pro-choicers. They say, well, pro-choicers think that murdering born or preborn children is okay. Mm-hmm. Well, would it be okay to murder a born child for that reason? And it's the same thing you can do against pro-lifers, right? Pro-lifers will say, well, if it's preborn, the mother shouldn't face any punishment. But what about if the mother murders her newborn child because the child was conceived in rape?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
And they change the standard of coercion there, too. Like when you use that for coercion, because when they're thinking about coercion, they're thinking about like, oh, she might get kicked out of her apartment. She might get like all these different things.
Yeah.
But then when you think, okay, but would a woman with her born child, would she be justified in strangling them to death? Like no punishment, strangling them to death because she was going to get kicked out of her apartment? No. They completely changed the standard for coercion.
Because it's ageism. It's not treating the child in the womb equal as an equal human with equal justice under the law. Mm-hmm. It's so a lot of this that we're covering these components and showing that the pro-lifers are so inconsistent and that these are bills. This is why we want to make sure that they're in the bills. Right. So we're going to move on to the third one, but the last point on equal protection that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah. So there's a third reason why it's very important for equal protection to be included in a bill, and that is the fact that not having equal protection undercuts us both morally in our moral argument against abortion and actually legally as well. Mm-hmm. And so on the legal front, I'm gonna quote directly from the Roe decision here. This is Roe footnote 54. So this is the author of Roe was Justice Harry Blackmun, and this is him explaining his decision to decriminalize abortion in every state. He writes, I should preface this. So Texas, the state of Texas was saying that the 14th Amendment applies to the preborn child, and so equal protection has to be given to the preborn child. And Blackmun's response is, there are other inconsistencies between 14th Amendment status and the typical abortion statute. It has already been pointed out that in Texas, the woman is not a principal or an accomplice with respect to an abortion upon her. If the fetus is a person, why is the woman not a principal or an accomplice? Further, the penalty for criminal abortion specified by Article 1195 is significantly less than the maximum penalty for murder prescribed by Article 1257 of the Texas Penal Code. If the fetus is a person, may the penalties be different. And so what he's saying there is that if you're going to argue equal protection, if you're going to argue that the child in the womb is equal to the child or human outside the womb, you can't have different penalties for killing one as opposed to killing the other. You've got to actually, you can't just say they're equal and then treat them unequally under law. You've got to actually provide the same penalty for murdering the one as you provide for murdering the other. And if you don't, you've undercut yourself in the court of law. You've undercut yourself.
Yeah, and they're going to bring it up in the court.
Yeah, because that's what's really interesting about that to me is because they appeal to what the law was previously in order to...
Pro-lifers do?
Pro-lifers do. They appeal to what the law was before on abortion in order to justify what they want to do in the future.
Yeah. They'll say, we've never punished the woman. And you're like, and that's why abortion is legal.
That's how we got Roe in the first place.
You got Roe in the first place from the very beginning because of this unequal justice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So hugely important point. And, for pro-lifers watching this or listening to this, they need to deal with that. These things aren't just bad because they're ineffective ways of getting rid of abortion. These things are bad because they're the reasons that we have abortion.
And so once again, we've got this intrinsic injustice, right, of not providing equal protection, not treating them equally under the law, not treating preborn children equal to born children. And then the secondary effect of that intrinsic injustice is that you've undercut yourself. Yeah. As Blackmun explained in footnote 54.
So from the beginning, they've been self-refuting because of not applying equal protection. So super important. Now, the fourth component is, shorthand, we say it's the ignore Roe component, the nullifying the unjust, unconstitutional Supreme Court opinion of Roe v. Wade. So this is probably, I've never seen an ignore Roe clause in any pro-life legislation.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you'd want an ignore Roe clause even in a heartbeat bill or a 20-week abortion bill. You need one because the finding, the finding of Roe v. Wade was that mothers have the right to terminate their pregnancies under the right to privacy, that they have a fundamental right to abortion. And so that's the decree of the Supreme Court. And of course, any bill of any kind that's going to say, no, mothers do not have a fundamental right to murder their children, there's no constitutional right, is going to be at its base challenging straight up Roe v. Wade.
It's not going into the reason it's useless without it. Heartbeat bill, whatever the bill is, if it contradicts Roe, it's useless without an ignore Roe clause because it's not going to be upheld. And this is something that don't hate the messenger on this, but the court is not overturning Roe anytime soon. And that's actually an episode that we're going to be filming soon, talking about the history of Supreme Court appointments and all of that. But we've got one justice who has ever declared that Roe should be overturned, Clarence Thomas. And we've got 4 others who are appointed by Republicans who refuse to call for Roe to be overturned. Like, every time Clarence Thomas writes an opinion saying Roe should be overturned,
shouldn't have ever been constitutional in the first place.
Right.
Alito, none of the other justices agree with him.
None of them. Not Alito, not Roberts, not Kavanaugh, not Gorsuch. And they just had an opportunity, right, with June Medical Services case that was decided this summer.
All they had to do is concur.
All they had to do was say, I agree with Clarence Thomas. And they didn't.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got one justice who is on record saying Roe should be overturned. And so we're not going to see that anytime soon. And as an example, right, we had a bill in Alabama last year In 2019, it was the Life at Conception Act, right? And so that's one of the components, life at conception. So
it looks good.
We're good there.
Life conception.
The problem is among other problems, the bill had a couple other problems, but one of them was it didn't have ignore row. And so here's what happens. Here's a headline from just a couple of weeks after the Life at Conception Act was passed and signed by the Alabama governor. Here's a headline: Planned Parenthood builds Alabama clinic despite abortion law. And I'll just read a little bit of an excerpt here. Planned Parenthood is building the stage for another possible fight over abortion in Alabama, a large women's clinic that's under construction despite the state's passage of a near total ban on abortions. A spokeswoman for Planned Parenthood said neither the law nor opponents were a factor in the project. Right, the Life at Conception Act did not even factor into Planned Parenthood's thinking of whether or not to build a new clinic because they know it's gonna be struck down. Yeah. The court's not going to allow it.
And they don't just know this because that's the history. Like so you would say the history of pro-life legislation in the United States of America has been they put forward this bill. They're trying to work within the confines of the Supreme Court's rulings, and then the Supreme Court says, well, actually, it's not constitutional because we've ruled already. Stare decisis, we've ruled. The courts already have said women have a right to abort babies, so you're not allowed to do this, this, or this. So there's this history that Planned Parenthood, NARAL, all the people, they know that these bills are never going to go into effect. But in Alabama, in particular, this is a bill that does, just to make sure people understand, it's a Life at Conception Act. It says, abortion is going to be banned in Alabama from the moment of conception, and it doesn't even include any exceptions for rape and incest. So it looks great
in many ways.
In many ways, and the pro-lifers who are raising money for it or getting votes for it can say, hey, this is like a total no exceptions abortion ban. But the sneaky thing that they did is they actually write into the law that we are not going to nullify Roe. We're not going to ignore Roe. We're not going to defy Roe. In fact, we are going to comply with Roe. So nothing in this bill. So you have the actual language. This is from, HB 616 in Alabama.
Yeah, HR 616.
Or HR.
Yep. And so this is talking about a previous portion of Alabama code that has not been repealed. So it says, this state statute criminalizing abortion, section 13A, 13-7, Code of Alabama 1975, has never been repealed. Yep. But it has remained unenforceable as a result of the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade. And so literally in the bill, they're saying something is unenforceable, like the protection of human life. We cannot enforce the laws protecting human life because the Supreme Court says we can't. Yeah. Now, I would say even worse than the bill itself was the statement that Alabama Governor Kay Ivey put out the day that she signed this bill.
Yeah, so she was hailed as this pro-life governor who's signing this bill to criminalize abortion, to ban abortion, and so she's involved in the process. She's talking to the legislators, the lobbyists. So when she signs this and the big pictures are being taken, immediately she knows to write this. This is the following day.
Yeah, so she writes, to all Alabamians, I assure you that we will continue to follow the rule of law. No matter one's personal view on abortion, we can all recognize that at least for the short term, this bill may be unenforceable. As citizens of this great country, we must always respect the authority of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah. So we banned abortion. We criminalized it without exceptions from the moment of conception, but we're not going to enforce it because we think that the more important thing to value here is submission to the Supreme Court.
Right. This is the thing. This one was the first one I got as far as the abolitionist points. I think 5 years ago I posted something on Facebook about how we needed to defy Roe and all that. This is the first one. It seems so self-evident to me. And then they go and they write these things and they pretend like they're going to do something, and there's no teeth behind it at all.
Yeah.
And it's like examples of nullification are all over the streets here with all the marijuana places, but for whatever reason, we're submitting ourselves to this kind of nonsense.
Yeah. And it's because you have some other people criticizing it, someone saying, well, what are you going to disregard the Supreme Court? And it's like they rush to say, no, we're not going to do that because we believe in the rule of law. Well, actually, we believe in the submission to unjust rules and decrees. We don't believe in the rule of law, because that would be Lex Rex or whatever. That would be like that law is king,
right,
and that the Supreme Court itself needs to be overturned because it's not lawful.
Yeah, this is an important point, and this first sentence I read from KIV's statement makes me really, really mad. So she says, "I assure you, we will continue to follow the rule of law." Right? That's the claim. The reality is that KIV and any pro-life or anybody who thinks they should submit to Roe does not care for the rule of law. They spit on the rule of law if they think that Roe v. Wade is something that we should respect.
Yeah, we've got moral anarchy right now. If you don't defy Roe, you are submitting yourself to moral anarchy and legal anarchy. Like the Constitution says one thing, Roe says another thing, and they are completely disregarding the Constitution over Roe. These constitutional conservatives that are so concerned about it, but it's like, no, you're not concerned about the Constitution. If you're going to listen to Roe, you don't care what the Constitution has to say about the protection of innocent human beings.
Right. The actual law says that no state may deny to anyone the equal protection of the law. That's the actual law that needs to be respected.
The law of the land. The Constitution says that.
Right. Roe is in contradiction with that.
Yeah, it's unconstitutional.
And so what you've got is the law, the actual Constitution on one side, and then, this is a point that we talked about a lot last week, but the law of God, God's word on one side. You've got the Constitution and God's word on one side, the actual law, and then you've got a court opinion on the other.
the decrees of 9 unelected, lifetime lawyers.
Yeah, the arbitrary and unabashedly wicked.
Yeah, it's like, I will submit to man and man's decrees and not follow God, which is like a big fundamental problem. But what's crazy is you will actually talk to the pro-lifers. I've done this, to, guys like Greg Treat and, say, well, okay, so you're saying that abortion is constitutional. And they'll be like, no, I'm not saying abortion's constitutional. You're like, well, what are you saying? It's like, we're saying that the Supreme Court has said that abortion's constitutional, and that we can't nullify. Well, like, what happens whenever you, as an elected leader in the Senate, legislator here, believe that the Supreme Court has made an unconstitutional opinion? How do you check them on that? And should you check them on that? They fall back and they say that they're the arbiters of what is and is not constitutional. And so they just totally leave that up to them. And they're never, as you started out, they're never going to just wake up, they wake up in the morning and they put on their black robes and they're like, what are we doing today? I don't know. Let's repeal Roe v. Wade and the 37 decisions that we've held. This is not something they're going to do, because they'd have to admit that they ruled unjustly and they've upheld unjust, unconstitutional laws this entire time. And why would they do that? Every legislator, certainly the conservative pro-life side, says we are not going to do anything that goes against your rulings, and we will submit. They don't just say this rhetorically. They say that in their own laws, their own defenses of their own laws.
Yeah.
Which I might add that you could actually say, well, what if the Supreme Court said that men have the constitutional right to rape children? Would you just go along with it? They're always like, no, I wouldn't go along with that.
By this logic,
yes, you would. You'd have to.
You would.
And they say they wouldn't, and then they're like, no, I wouldn't. But right there, they've just betrayed their ageist, dehumanizing ways. Yeah. You're not allowed to rape children, but I would stand up and nullify it, but I won't if you're talking about murdering them.
Yeah.
So
even with gun rights and stuff like that, if you had the Supreme Court saying we're going to take away your right to bear arms, there wouldn't be no obedience on that.
Oh yeah,
it shows how scandalous the fact that we won't ignore Roe is.
Yeah,
you can kill your children, you can murder your baby, and we will not ignore Roe. But if you take from us something like our firearms, which is an important right, it is an important right. It's not a genocide against preborn babies, and we're not willing to defy for that.
Right.
That is insane.
The pro-gun lobby says, from my cold, dead hands.
From my cold, dead hands.
The pro-life lobby says, unconditional, you have our unconditional submission no matter what, no matter what murder you command our states to allow. Yeah. We unconditionally submit.
Let us assure you.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the same thing. We don't have to go into detail on it, but Senate Bill 1721, Bullard's bill that was actually written as a sort of antithesis to Senate Bill 13, sort of put forward as a substitute bill. I remember back whenever Bullard was going to support Senate Bill 13, he wanted the 10th Amendment to be in there. You know, he wanted, well, I want the 10th Amendment to be specified in there. And of course, then whenever he, whatever backroom conversation he has that makes him go anti-abolitionist, he does put, whenever he writes Senate Bill 1721, he does put the 10th Amendment in there, but he does an interesting thing. You have the language there as well. You can read it, so I'm not misrepresenting it.
Yeah, this is a pretty crazy one. So this is a bill. It's actually very similar to the Alabama bill that we just referenced. So I'm just going to read a portion from Oklahoma Senate Bill 1721. So it starts off really good, again, like the Alabama bill. Consistent with Amendments 5 and 14 of the United States Constitution and pursuant to powers reserved to this state by Amendment 10 of the U.S. Constitution, the laws of this state shall be interpreted and construed to acknowledge on behalf of the unborn person at every stage of development all the rights, privileges, and immunities available to other persons, citizens, and residents of this state.
Sounds great.
Fantastic. Like, that's what we're looking for.
Yep.
Now, here's this next part.
Yeah.
Subject only to the Constitution of the United States.
Good.
And decisional interpretations thereof by the United States Supreme Court.
It's like he didn't want to say that they were constitutional, kind of, but he wanted to be basically make sure this is not a nullification bill. We are not we want all the laws to be applied equally to all people, but not if the Supreme Court says we don't.
Right.
Like, it's like the chief value is to make sure that people understand we ain't nullifiers. We will not stand up for preborn children.
Yeah.
I want to mention the 10th Amendment so that I can mock the 10th Amendment.
Right. It's comical. It's literally, I am asserting Oklahoma's 10th Amendment rights if the Supreme Court gives me permission to.
Yeah.
Like, we are a sovereign state.
Yeah.
If the federal government says we're a sovereign state.
Yeah.
It's
and of course,
so absurd.
The framers put the 10th Amendment in there for states to be able to check the oligarchs.
Right.
You know, like in the event, well, what happens if the Supreme Court, well, we need the 10th Amendment. That's like literally why they put it in there. Yeah. And then Bullard, and I mean, I hate to clown on him so much, but this is a guy who likes the "Don't Tread on Me" flag.
Yeah.
You know, this bill though, 1721 is like, tread on me. Like, I want to protect
lie
babies.
Down in front of you so that you can tread on me.
Yeah. Just so you know, I assure you that if you come to tread on me, I'll be like laying down. I mean,
you may not tread on me unless the interpretation of the person treading on me is to
that you can tread on me.
Yeah.
Now, and it's worse. It's not. It's like, you may not kill babies. I will stand up for babies unless you tell me to sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, get out of the freaking legislator.
Yeah.
You're a tool of the state. So that's not too mean. So ignoring Roe, that needing to be in there, because we see like in the Alabama bill, and I don't know if they ever had to specify it, but it seems like after HB 948, the Texas bill was just the sort of first pure full-on abolition bill that said, and we acknowledge this is in contradiction to the unjust, unconstitutional decree of Roe. We get that, and we're nullifying it.
Yeah.
Ever since that, I think that as people, legislators and pro-life lobbyists and organizations begin to see this, they're going, they're going to double down, and they're going to put it in their language. I can't think of any other reason why they would include that in the Alabama bill or in SB 1721, except for to basically raise their hand and say, we're not abolitionist. So these aren't just components that we're choosing arbitrary.
Yeah.
This is, that is a major component that it on its face acknowledges. And, Senator Greg Treat will be like, I want to protect babies, but I will not nullify. Yeah. He's like anti-nullification. I will not stand up for preborn children.
Well, one other point that's important to get back to here, I think, is the one that Sam brought up about how this is really a self-evident thing, right? The idea that when some authority tells you allow mass murder in your jurisdiction, the idea that you should say no, right? That you should defy or ignore, whatever you want to call it, that you should push back against that. That is, it should be self-evident.
Yeah.
Right? But there's like this judicial supremacy is so ingrained in our body politic that we just think, we got to obey Supreme Court. But it's like, no, wait, they're actually telling you allow mass murder, right? And so if you're going to say, well, we have to allow mass murder because, because that's what the people above me said.
Yeah.
How are you different than the Nazi standing trial in Nuremberg who's saying,
and of course they say that
I'm just following orders.
They say that they are different.
Yeah, and I think on this point too, it's like this is the thing that sold me on the pro-life movement being faithless in this regard, because I think, and they'll fearmonger about this so much. They'll say stuff like, "Oh, what are they going to do to you if you defy the Supreme Court? They'll send in all the troops and they'll do all these terrible things," and they just create all these scenarios and they spit it out. It's like at the end of the day, you're just being. And I'll say this to you: if you're doing that kind of thing, you are being a spineless coward. You are saying, because we don't want them to come at us, let them kill our babies in our state.
Yeah.
You are so spineless.
Yeah. Or even worse, they'll say something like they'll take away our funding.
Yeah.
Like, wait a second.
That's the Abby Johnson thing.
Yeah. Abby Johnson's like, well, we can't criminalize abortion in Texas because that'll cost us economically.
It wouldn't be pro-life to abolish abortion because we'd lose funding for
our roads or something.
Our schools, hospitals, roads. Yeah.
And you're just like, can I point out the fact that you're basically saying that I want to be known as pro-life, but not if it costs me anything?
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible.
There goes all of your moral credibility. Like here you are saying, oh, this is a Holocaust, this is a genocide, this is murder. I'm not going to defy you because you might take away our funding.
Yeah.
Like get over that.
But it is
so cowardly.
But they're betraying their main thing. You turn around and say, well, so what do you want? What do you want the federal government to do?
Yeah.
To defund Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Which is a tremendously weak sauce. Total. It's a total
and they don't
ineffective,
even demand that
inadequate.
too.
Yeah. They don't. Well, they just want them to stand on a podium and bang on it and say, and I'm going to defund Planned Parenthood in my second term or whatever. They want you to make promises about defunding Planned Parenthood and then never do it. But it's because they want to keep their own wallets clean. Don't spend my tax money, because it is all this selfish, me-centered, humanist thing. Now, if they were basically going to take the abolitionist position and they say, okay, here's the deal. We think that all human beings should be protected by our laws, treated equally, and there should be justice, all this kind of stuff. And in the event that the Supreme Court says that it's okay, well, the Supreme Court can pound sand, and the Supreme Court can send their army if they want. And someone says, well, so you're wanting this conflagration? You want the Supreme Court? Like, what if they're going to come here and fight you and force you to kill children? The right answer is that will be on them.
Mm-hmm. Right, and this is something that Wesley Thomas, actually, of Abolish Abortion Texas, he said it really, really well at the recent Texas Republican Party convention, where they were trying to make abortion's abolition a legislative priority, and they succeeded. But in his testimony, one of the things he said was, if we're not willing to put ourselves between the federal government and the preborn children who are being murdered, if we're not willing to interpose for them, we're asking them to lay down their lives for our own comfort and security, and financial well-being. Yeah,
and why are you even pretending to be pro-life even?
That's one of the things J.J. Francis always says. Our friend J.J. Francis, the esteemed reporter, he always says things like, oh, you guys mortgage your house or something like that. Every single time this comes up. It's like as if millions and millions and millions of dollars haven't been spent on all these pro-life regulations over 4 decades. But beyond that, it's like, if you're saying my finances are more important than preborn children in your state, how low is that?
Oh, I know. He's just revealing
wallowing
the
in the
state
mud
of his own heart. But I looked at that comment and I'm like, it's not really even worth responding to, because this guy's like, probably, I don't know anything about this guy. He seems really immature and messed up in various ways, and I don't really want to get into it. Yeah. But it's kind of like, it's like grabbing a dog by the ears sort of thing. But I looked at that and I'm like, honey, would we mortgage our house to help pay for it? Okay, yeah, we would. What's the issue here? Like, shouldn't we all basically die to ourselves for our neighbors?
Again, this is a Holocaust.
Yeah.
Like, that is what we're...
And Holocausts go on because people have this view, this worldview, and this view about themselves.
Right.
Like, whenever the Jews were being taken off the streets, the reason people didn't do anything about it is because they were concerned about what would happen to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we could probably do a whole episode, of course, on any one of these, but on the ignore row, it's just such a defining thing. Yeah. Like, in a sense where if you have everything else and you don't have this, your bill, as good as it might be, is going to run into this. Now, you could have a bill that doesn't have it explicitly put in there, but you're prepared to explicitly ignore Roe, and that's why you're writing the bill.
Right.
So that could be seen, but I think in a culture that we have where we believe that the law is a tutor and all that kind of stuff, better to have it in there.
Right. If you have a bill that's great in every other respect but doesn't have this one part, this doesn't have this ignore Roe part, one, you're opening up the door for Planned Parenthood to come start to build a
Planned Parenthood
facility.
looks at the bill and says,
right,
well, they're not going to ignore Roe, so let's just go ahead and start a new, let's build a, state-of-the-art abortion mill.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then even from an abolitionist perspective, you could say, well, should we still support a bill even if it doesn't have that one part, if it's good in every other way? And it's like, well, maybe, you could make the argument that, well, the governor and the attorney general and whoever should enforce it, even if it doesn't say it in the bill.
Yeah.
But the fact is, if you don't have it in the bill, you're leaving that up to their interpretation. And then it's just a he said, she said, who wants to interpret it.
Yeah.
However, should we interpret this to mean subject to the Supreme Court or subject to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution? Or, how are we going to interpret this? If you don't have the ignore Roe in there, it's just up to whoever's interpretation.
Yeah.
And so it's very important that it's in there.
When you have it in there, people know, the governor, when it gets to his desk. So let's go all the way back. When you have it in there, the legislators know I am literally saying that I am willing to uphold the principles of the Declaration of Independence, the law of God, the Constitution rightly interpreted against this unjust decree. I know what I'm doing. It's for protecting children and establishing equal justice in Oklahoma or whatever state you're doing it. That's what I'm voting for. And then when it goes onto the governor's desk, he's signing, I'm going to nullify Roe. I'm going to be the governor of the state that says, as for within our borders, we're not going to protect the right to murder humans. We hold the right to life here.
Yeah. And it's really significant at that point, too, because every legislator in the state house is saying to the governor that this is something that they should do.
Yeah, the people are behind this. We're behind this. Sign this.
Yeah.
So it's way more likely that he enforces it. Now he still has to enforce it. Mm-hmm. There's still that thing.
Right.
And so the people are behind him, the legislature's behind him, and he's behind it, and then we have it. Now, if you don't have the nullification in there, you have this opportunity where you can be like, I'm going to sign it, and then send out a letter the next day. Well, I signed that because I believe in it, but of course I'm going to submit to the Supreme Court.
Like this one from KIV. How dare we entertain this lawless idea that we would.
But he couldn't do that if you put the ignore Roe in there. So that's why it's very, very important. And I'll admit that the first bill that I had any involvement with, Senate Bill 1118, it was just to criminalize abortion, no exceptions from conception, modify the murder code, abortion shouldn't. And it was because we wanted to ignore Roe, nullify Roe. In fact, we had that on the pamphlets, We were mocking the Supreme Court and their unjust decrees. But we didn't have that in the language because it happened really quick and, is the first one. But whereas that's good, it wasn't anywhere near as good as Senate Bill 13 because Senate Bill 13 had all 5 components. So super, super important not to submit to Roe, just all sorts of folly there. So that's the 4th component. So real quick, abolish abortion from conception, no exceptions, equal protection, ignore Roe. And then the 5th one, which may also be a bit controversial, but it shouldn't be after everything we've talked about so far, it's that the bill needs to repeal or supersede all contrary statutes, including pro-life abortion regulations. So in the bill, it has to be written in such a way that it either goes through and repeals all the abortion regulations, keeping abortion legal. So an example would be like in the state of Oklahoma, to get an abortion, you have to wait 72 hours. So there's an actual law. It's in our statutes that says when you're getting an abortion, you have to get the appointment and wait 72 hours. It's passed by pro-lifers and celebrated by pro-lifers and prayed for by pro-lifers. Well, that bill basically is saying to get an abortion, you have to check this box off. I wait longer, for my dentist appointments. But if you, say, passed a bill criminalizing abortion that didn't have language either repealing that or superseding it, and by superseding just mean like that this law against abortion will supersede all other laws on the books that say you can get an abortion if you didn't repeal them or supersede them, the abortionist himself could be like, I see that you've passed this bill criminalizing abortion. But over here, it says I can perform an abortion if I look at an ultrasound first. I can perform an abortion if my hallways are certain length. I can perform an abortion if it's before 20 weeks. I can perform an abortion on and on and on. So it's like there's like almost 30 laws in Oklahoma that are written by pro-lifers that are regulations for an abortion. Senate Bill 1721 itself, it says if you fulfill all these things, you can fulfill an abortion.
1728.
1728, sorry.
Yes.
So basically, the abortionist himself could cite pro-life laws to justify his abortions.
Yeah, because it's not like there's pro-choice laws that are on the books. It's not like the legislature passed laws allowing for abortion. It's just the pro-life laws that would be keeping them in place at that point.
Because there's just submission to the Supreme Court and pro-life laws.
Yeah.
And so you have to not submit to the Supreme Court, and then you have to repeal all those things that have accrued over time.
Yeah.
And so...
Which is really sad, because they actually become, however well-intended they may be, they become the protections of abortion. The only substantive protections of abortion in any state.
Right. And so the point is you can't have a law saying abortion is illegal after 20 weeks, but legal before that, and also have a law saying abortion is murder, right? You can't have pro-life abortion regulations and an abolition bill. The abolition bill has to repeal them. Yeah. But what's so frustrating, and I think in a lot of cases dishonest about how the pro-life lobbyists and politicians play this, is they say that, if we abolish abortion, then we're gonna lose all of our pro-life regulations, and all the people who read their newsletters and emails and stuff get.
That's one of the arguments they use against, say, Senate Bill 13.
Yeah, they say, oh no, we're gonna lose our last 18 years of hard-fought pro-life victories, right? and that's what people get in their heads from reading the stuff the pro-lifers put out there. But the reality is they have to be repealed. Otherwise, you can't abolish abortion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You can't have both.
They're not a victory if they're what keeps abortion legal.
Right.
Yeah. Which, if you go back and you look at the transcript of the conversation between Greg Treat and Joseph Silk at the Health and Human Services Committee, Greg Treat does admit, he goes, you know what? I've thought about it. We are going to, in the event that we overturn, in the event that the Supreme Court allows us to protect preborn image bearers, we are going to have to get rid of all these pro-life laws. Like he admitted it. After he sat around and thought about it, because we're going to have to clean up the law books. That's what they do. Legislators do this all the time.
Right.
And I think that like the pro-life lobbyist is using it as a sort of like scare tactic. Like if we pass this bill to abolish abortion, and the way it's formulated is like say Senate Bill 13 not only criminalizes abortion in all instances, but it also repeals all the pro-life abortion regulations that make abortion legal. One, because it has to. Yeah. But a lot of pro-lifers are like, well, what if that passes, it goes to the liberal Supreme Court of Oklahoma, and the justices strike down the criminalization of abortion part, and they also strike down all the pro-life laws. Look, you've done this thing, and now we're in a worse state. Like they argue that, and at one level it's totally dishonest because of what's written in the bill.
Right. And this is, I mentioned it's frustrating and dishonest earlier, and this is the part that's just dishonest. The bill has a clause in it. So this is from Senate Bill 13, the Abolition of Abortion in Oklahoma Act. This is section 34 of SB 13. It says, the provisions, words, phrases, and clauses of this act are declared to be inseverable. That's in the bill itself. Yeah. Right. And so a judge,
for that very reason, to deal with that very objection.
And so a judge could not uphold the parts that repeal pro-life regulations while striking down the part that abolishes abortion. A judge would not be able to do that. And so when they say that, they're not even telling the truth about what's in the bill and how it would be received by a court.
What's funny is pro-lifers do turn around and be like, but they could, even though it says it, they don't have to follow it, which just shows like what they think about judges. Like those judges could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You're just like, you sent me a bill abolishing abortion, and I looked at it and I thought about it, and we all got together and we decided that abortions will be mandated every second child.
Yeah.
Like judges can't do this stuff.
Right.
But you know what? I bet the legislature in that instance, the pro-life legislature, would be willing to ignore the court about their exceptions.
Yeah.
I bet they'd be willing to say, let's ignore them on this.
Which shows you that at some point you're always going to have to ignore, like when courts rule unjustly, you have to ignore them. Right. You have to challenge them.
And this idea that a court could ignore this non-severability clause, that idea is an even better argument that we need to ignore the courts. If the courts are that corrupt that they would straight up ignore a non-severability clause, then we need to freaking defy them because they don't care what the law is, and they need to be checked.
Yeah, so
that's a better argument for abolition.
Yeah, so it's super clear. These are all consistent together. But like when I see this, and I know that they're being dishonest, I was like, one, that's not even real. Like it's got language in there saying that what you're saying could happen is not allowed to happen. That's in there. Just Tony Lounger and the lying liars who lie have lied to you, and you've fallen for it without reading or thinking. Yeah. And that's why we have to write pamphlets and try to combat these speculations. But I also look at it and be like, well, what would be so bad about overturning all these pro-life laws and regulations? It's not like they're saving anyone. It's not like requiring people like, oh no, in Oklahoma, you're going to overturn the 72-hour waiting period. Well, the 72-hour waiting period wasn't curtailing abortion. It wasn't causing abortion numbers to decline. You actually look at it, the years where they pass these pro-life regulations and celebrate them, they're all dumbfounded when the abortion rate goes up.
Yeah, from 16 to 17 and from 17 to 18, which are both years where there were pro-life regulations passed.
Where we were the most pro-life state in the union.
Most pro-life state in the union, abortions went up in those years.
Yeah. And you got the editors of the Southern Baptist Messenger going like, we don't know what's going on. Just like, well, what's going on is you need to come to terms with the fact that your pro-life regulations, not only do they submit to the Supreme Court, they are unjust, they're iniquitous, they don't protect any babies. They don't even, in your pragmatic sense, decrease the number, which is what they use to argue.
Right.
So we have to keep them on the books. Why? What are they doing?
And another important point with that is that pro-lifers often point to a decrease in abortions, from around the early to mid 90s until now, which is true. Abortion rates from the early 90s to now have gone down.
There's been a decline.
Right.
Not
because of pro-life regulations, and we know it's not because of pro-life regulations because the abortion rate in New York and the abortion rate in Oklahoma since the early 90s has gone down at roughly the same rate. And obviously in New York, you've got no abortion laws at all, obviously, or only laws passed by pro-choicers. In Oklahoma, we got pro-life regulation after pro-life regulation after pro-life regulation.
Every year.
And yet in Oklahoma and Texas and Idaho and a lot of pro-life states, the abortion rate since the 90s, which is what is so often cited by pro-lifers, the decrease in pro-life versus pro-choice states is roughly the same.
Yeah.
And so it's not because of the pro-life regulations. That's not to say that no pro-life regulation has ever saved a life. There's probably a few lives that have been saved, but the idea that there's this significant decrease, from 1.6 million or whatever it was down to 0.9 or whatever we're at now.
Yeah.
That decrease is not because of pro-life regulations. There's no significant
And whereas,
decrease.
and even if you could find some anecdotal instance where a life was saved, that's all well and good, but we're arguing that all these lives are murdered because you passed this regulation that may or may not have saved someone somewhere at some time that you can cite.
And you did that instead.
You did that instead of prohibiting the mass murder of everyone,
which is what you have a moral obligation to do.
And they're arguing, look, it saved this life, that's why we need to keep on not saving all lives. Right. It's just completely asinine.
It's absurd.
So I think we've gone pretty long, but those are, unless we need to add anything, those are the 5 components that are just absolutely crucial to an abolition bill. But like, we want to lay them out and talk through them. Again, we have a document on our website. You just go on there and it's 5 components of an abolition bill. But use these for looking whenever you see, like a lot of times, like some new pro-life bill is put forward and LifeSite News is running an article on it and may call it an abortion ban and so on and so forth. You don't believe what you see on Facebook in the way that it's promoted. Yeah. You have to look up the actual bill. You have to go through the language and look for these things. Is it establishing equal protection, equal justice? Yeah. Does it have exceptions? Is it from conception? Does it nullify Roe? Mm-hmm. Does it repeal all these, pro-choice abortion regulations, pro-life regulations? And so use these to assess whether or not you're going to get behind a bill. Now, we do, as an organization, our principal thing, we run this podcast and do other things, but our principal thing is to support legislation that is abolitionist. So these are the components that we use to judge whether a bill. So any bill that gets propped up in the culture, Free the States is going to basically, we're going to do a lot of that work for you. When we say a bill is an abolitionist bill or a pro-life bill, it's because we're using these 5 components and we're judging that bill based on a lot of the things that we've talked about today.
Right. Yeah. And one other important thing to do with these is to try to get a bill consistent with these introduced in your state if your state doesn't have one already. So a bunch of states already do have one. So Oklahoma, Texas, Indiana, Missouri, Idaho, Alaska, Washington, and then those are the ones that have them already, and 3 more coming next session. Yeah. But talk to your legislators. Email your state senator, email your state rep, and meet with them and say, will you introduce a bill consistent with these principles? And you can actually print out, if you go online, if you Google OK SB 13 or TX HB 896, you can actually print out the text of what an example is, and then
good model language.
Right, model language, and explain these 5 principles, and try to get something like this going in your state. Yeah,
because I think there are a lot of people who get zealous and like, I want to do this, want to get it right. I mean, sometimes people will message me language, and they'll be like, what do you think about this? And I'll look at it, and it'll be like, it'll be great on one of these, but bad on the rest of them, or good on all of them, but bad on. It really does have to be all 5. Yeah. And hopefully in this episode, we've explained why that is. So yeah, get out there, talk to your legislators, share this video. I mean, I know it's long. I know there's a lot here, but for those who are really serious about writing language, helping their legislators to write language, because a lot of these legislators are not going to write the bill themselves. They write them in conversation with other people. Mm-hmm. And there's this period where they'll write it and they'll show it to you and be like, is this cool with you? And you're going to look at it and you're going to have to be able to say, with some kind of reasoned argument, you're going to have to be able to say, well, it's a really good bill. I like that it's no exceptions. I like it's from conception. But this line in here about, but there will be no punishment for the mother for the principle, because, I mean, abortionists aren't going out there and killing babies. Babies are being brought to them. And so you're going to have to talk through it with your legislator. But the legislator is swimming in a culture where all of these things that we've talked about are weighing against him. And he thinks for rhetorical, cultural reasons, he can't put that in there. I cannot put equal justice in there because, that's not what the pro-lifers believe. That's why Donald Trump changed his mind. It's like someone called him from the pro-life movement and said, no one in the pro-life movement thinks that you should punish women for murdering their children. Well, we need these ideas out there so that begins to change and it begins to be reflected in our laws. So hopefully this show's been very edifying, educational, and, thanks for tuning in. We will be doing another show next Thursday night, 6 p.m. So thanks for watching the Liberator podcast.
Thanks.